Now, I'm really interested in what Llewellyn has to say here. Mob programming, to me, based at least the way I've been doing programming for umpteen years, that is just the exact, to me, this sounds like something completely foreign. Even the people I work with now, I guess we're kind of doing things on Zoom now in a certain way, which may be mob-ish, I guess, in kind of way, but not the way I'm sure that the way Llewellyn's going to be presenting it.
Hello, everyone. Before I start this, I just wanted to have a quick conversation because I was going through the talk today, and I realized that this talk came about before the.
Very tricky.
Let me fix that. So this talk came about before COVID-19, right? Like, and the world has sort of shifted a bit, and I feel like maybe this talk needs to shift a little bit. So I wanted to kind of get an idea of what people's lives are like right now. My assumption, this has sort of been on my side and what I've seen, is that everything has moved to remote. And with remote, I have seen an increase in meetings. Does that match with our, let's just do some voting, like meetings, more meetings, less meetings.
But Llewellyn, if you don't mind me, jumping in here. What I have found is that in the past, I could poke my head in someone's door and ask them a question, get an answer in 2 or 3 minutes. Now I have to reserve their time, a 15-minute call. I've got a bunch of 15-minute meetings on my calendar that I never used to have because I used to be able to pop my head in someone else's office.
Yeah, so maybe meetings are going up because communication is harder.
Yeah, I would agree with that. One thing I miss is I used to learn more from the hallway conversations, and the hallway conversations are gone, and I really miss those.
So what else has changed in people's life? What else is different from before?
People are, the people I talk to have openly said to me they're dealing with feelings of isolation, loneliness, and feelings of futility. Like Kimberly, I don't feel like getting on my computer because it's useless. And these are big, strong men who would never like to admit that.
Because it's useless.
Yep.
Wow.
And vice presidents who have disappeared, they're somehow vacationing in some part of the country, and their team hasn't heard from them since this happened. Oh yeah.
Wow.
What else has changed?
So people's kids and people's pets show up, and people are sharing more. I mean, we're seeing more of who people are because they're coming in from home.
Yeah, I had to help my a lady who works for me. She has like a 3.5-year-old, and she insisted on being on the video, and I used a snap camera to entertain her daughter a little bit, which was kind of fun. And so while our daughter was watching me have rabbit ears, I could have a meeting.
So just to add on to what they said, like I agree with Ron and Tom. I think the family thing is really good. I'm actually like, I get to have lunch every day with my kids. Okay.
How old are your kids?
I have little kids. I have a 5-year-old, 8-year-old, and a 10-year-old. So I mean, they have school from home.
Yeah.
Okay? So if you have like little kids, it's different. Like if they're really, really little, it's hard. I have someone on my team who has a 2-year-old, and she's really struggling with the whole work from home, as you can imagine. But if the kids are like in that middle age, there's some plus, it's not all bad. I don't miss commuting. Like the commuting is great, not to have to commute. So there's plus and minus to everything. I agree there's a lot, maybe more,
That's an interesting side. Like if commuting in the Bay Area takes a while.
There's no commuting. That's
Have
huge.
people found that they're working less hours then?
I think I'm down a little bit.
No, there's no.
But I'm well, I won't say I'm down. I'm saying it's actually quite displaced because I can all of a sudden go back to work whenever I want. So I might, even after this, I might go in there and check out some code or something like that. So all of a sudden I'm like, I might break it up more over the day.
So I just saw a lot of shaking heads.
As a consultant, I am busy all day, all night. I have clients all over the world who need help. I was up from midnight until 3 a.m. last night on Zoom calls.
Wow.
We're getting 1 to 2 hours of commute time back. It seemed to not show up on our lives.
Well, I think part of that has to do with the fact that, because we're working remote and we're having more meetings, and that's displacing that time that we're using to be very productive. So we're having to make up on it on the back end. I'm sorry for interrupting, Sue.
No, that might
No,
feed into
I
what
was going to
Kimberly was
say the
saying.
exact same thing because I have so many more meetings. Last night I couldn't start my work till 4:30 p.m. And then I was working, I could have worked much longer, but my husband's here and, he'd made my life difficult, so I'd stop and come have dinner. Sort of like having a 3-year-old.
So
It is like having a 3-year-old.
this might feed into what Kimberly was saying, that people are feeling less productive. And so even though they have that extra time that they're not commuting, they're using it, so they still try to look like they're somewhat productive. Jay, a friend of mine, was mentioning that he thought the reason meetings were up is because it used to be difficult to find meeting rooms. And now that there's infinite free meeting rooms, maybe it's just meetings are expanding to fill that space. Either way, okay, let's see if we can address some of those things.
I had one more thought on that. I've actually noticed, especially now that we've gone on to later on, basically now we're into like the 4th week, that I think some people are adding meetings and doing things because they feel loss of control. And they're basically, these things used to be able to go, like you said, John said earlier, you can poke in and have a casual thing. And so they're actually adding things and actually becoming a bit more terse about things. And it's because they're stuck at home with young kids and they're trying to.
In this group, everyone's familiar with the term information radiator? No?
Go ahead and talk about it.
So the idea of a radiator, right, is that it just passively radiates heat. And the idea of an information radiator is something where, without you querying it, without you asking about it, you can gather information from it. And so an example of this is like if I'm working remotely, right, and let's say that I'm working with Scott there, and I want to know how Scott's doing. I got to ask Scott, like, how are you doing, Scott? And then he needs to tell me. And so if I don't query, I have no idea, right? But if, say, me and Scott are working together, I can see him walk in with like a smile on his face and be like, oh, Scott's doing pretty good. Or see him walk in like sort of sneezy and grumpy and being like, oh, he's feeling a little sick. Or see him like storm in and be like, oh, Scott's having a bad day. And I'm not querying that information. It is just being thrown off for me to pick up. And a lot of that happens when you work closely together. And it's not happening now. And so we are doing other things to try to do that. And today we're going to talk about another thing you can do, another discipline you can do that has this as a side effect. And maybe nowadays that's even more important than it was before. All right, let's get started. All right, I assume you can see my desktop now. I assume you can see my slides now.
Yes, we can. Thank you, Llewellyn. And thanks for pausing to ask and check in on where people are with this COVID thing.
Yeah.
And thank you for showing us just how clean you keep your desktop.
Oh, you're welcome.
Oh, brother.
All right, can everyone see the slides properly now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so welcome. Today we are going to talk about mod programming, and we're going to talk about what it is and how to do it, but we're also going to treat it from the angle of, actually, I didn't ask this question. I probably should. Let's see if I can see everybody again. Whoosh. Does that, oh, do you see me seeing you? Did that make sense? Do you see pictures of yourself right now?
Yes.
About four of us.
You can select various modes, but if you select the grid video, you'll see everybody.
I am doing that. That's what I'm curious. I'm wondering.
Right, no. When you share your screen, we just see the slides. We don't see
okay.
the Zoom things from the slides. Yeah.
So
There is a side-by-side mode
yeah.
that you can choose that allows you to see both slides and it's under the view options in the menu bar.
Right, everybody should go to that now. Up to by the green bar, view options, side-by-side mode, you'll see the slides and some of our faces. Thank you.
And there's a bar between the slides and the pictures, and you can move it. And Llewellyn's saying, let's look at each other. So you
There we
can
go.
move that bar all the way to the left and have a gallery of all of us for the moment, and then enlarge the slides when he goes back to them.
So how many of you are in charge of other teams of programmers?
I am.
Just a few of you. All right, how many of you are influencing other teams of programmers?
I am.
What would the other roles, how would you describe your roles for the other people who didn't raise their hands yet? Silence. All right. Well, so I'm a technical Agile coach. And so my job is to change behavior of programmers, right? I'm an outside consultant, right? So I'm not like a team lead or like a manager or something like that. But I do come into companies 2 weeks at a time over the period of months and years and try to change the way programmers behave, right? And I want to show you one of the best tools I have in my toolbox for doing that. It's also one of the best tools I have for actually understanding what they do. So let's talk about, okay, now I need to be able to see my screen too. So how about that? That should work. All right. And I want to talk about how to do it remotely, because I think right now, doing stuff in person is just not happening. So there's some things that I've been learning as I've been doing this remotely. I want to share some of them with you as well. And so yesterday I did this. We had some workshops online for another conference, and I got 3 programmers that I got 4 hours with. And I thought, free work, let's take advantage of that. And so I guess my question is, you've worked with teams. If you had 3 programmers join you for 4 hours, what do you think you could get done with them? How long does it usually take someone to join your team and start being productive? Let's ask that question.
Yeah, it's funny you would say, because actually the first thought that came to mind was, well, what was the target of the meeting? You know, if you have to get together, yeah, the exact, okay, it's almost too broad. And so then,
Good
you
point.
know.
Sorry, let's narrow it. So we are C++ project with scripting and DevOps.
Wait, you lost me right there, sorry. Okay. Sorry, go on.
So guys, if you have a question that you ask, then let everybody type into chat, and then Llewellyn, you can read the chat responses.
Oh no, I can't read the chat responses.
If you type it in the chat, we'll see it, and one of us can do it.
Yeah.
It'll flash. So we got you covered.
That would
Llewellyn.
work. I'll have
Yeah,
you as designated audience member, Kimberly,
I'll do it.
because
Okay.
in full screen mode on my slides, it blocks off the chat.
No, I'll do it, and I'll read it with enthusiasm. Ooh.
Or heckle, you know, whatever it seems appropriate in the mode. So this is what we got done yesterday. You can see, so here are the 5 of us working, right? Here are the 3 new people. This, of course, is me. I was facilitating, and this is Claire. She's another member on the project that we're working on. Up until here, this was a feature. So we got that out and did a release. And then we started another feature, which we didn't finish. That's a really incredible way to onboard 3 people. And of the 3, one of them hadn't used C++ since college, and the other 2 hadn't used it. And I'm not sure what their Python experience was.
And this was all done in an online fashion. Everyone was remote. That's what
all done in an online fashion. I will check the thing, but I believe it was Belgium, UK, Austria. I forget what the third person was from. Canada, Alberta, Canada, and I'm in California. So we had not met them before. They had not met us. We got together. We did some work. I want to talk about how to do that. And of course, to do that, it has to fit to to our standards. It has to fit to our conventions. It has to fit to our workflow. We have to unify as a team. We had to form as a team in 4 hours, right? That team normalized in about 30 minutes for us. I'm going to talk about sort of how we do that.
I mean, can I ask you just one question? Sorry. Why was this team formed in such an odd? Is this inside what, a single company, or what was? How was this?
It was a workshop.
Just a workshop.
So no, it was just a workshop in a conference. There were 19 people facilitating mobs. I was one of the 19. And they told us, you can do whatever you want. And I thought, I want to make this experience as close to work as possible so they can get that experience. And since I have an open source project, just took advantage of free labor. Yeah. So mob programming. The Slack Overflow did a poll last year, and 5% of the teams reported using mob programming. That seems like a lot to me, but the thing about mob programming is maybe it shows up disproportionately in a poll, because like say you're on Slack Overflow and you're doing JavaScript, you might report that you're doing JavaScript, but probably the rest of your team won't. But if you're doing mob programming and you report, the rest of your team will too. Like your team tends to move together, right? So, you know, people might find out about it through Slack. They might find out through different talks or articles online or books. You might be discovering it through this talk. And the idea is pretty simple and a little bit crazy. We are all going to look at the same computer and program together on the same computer. And we're going to make it so that it's not just watching one person work, because that's not very good. And to do that, we're going to force the person at the keyboard not to be doing any real thinking, right? So that the rest of the people who aren't at the keyboard, that's where the thinking is going to occur. We're going to shift that. And this is going to just absolutely demolish a lot of your communication problems. So if you're having communication problems right now, maybe you should consider some of this. It's also going to shift what gets implemented. So it's always being implemented the best possible way, not just the person who happened to get the task. And so your quality is just going to go way up. And of course, quality going up means bugs go down. That means rework goes down. That means unplanned work goes down. And this is most people's reaction. In fact, I am utterly surprised at the amount of resistance people get to pairing and mobbing. It feels like getting productive work done is so scarce at a company that people think anything that threatens that just needs to be cut off right away. Getting 5 people together to do work seems absolutely just sacrilegious at companies. Getting 5 people together to talk about work, that is a daily occurrence. We have no problem getting people together to talk about work. But somehow getting people together to do work is where we draw the line. All right, if you're the type of person who wants the links at the front of the session, here they are. This is going to take you to a page of links to other resources. I will show this again at the end of the talk if you're the kind of person who likes to get it at the end. So mob programming, this is what it looks like when you can be in person. We are not in person nowadays, so this is what it looks like a lot more. This is what it looked like yesterday. We have one shared screen where we're doing the programming, and then we have everyone else on Zoom. Although, while this is the way it usually happens in the first couple sessions. This is not the way I actually prefer to do it. There's a lot of problems involved with this, and not the least of which is bandwidth. I don't know how everyone's been doing here, but I've been having bandwidth problems a lot during the day. And then if you have to go through a VPN, those bandwidth problems can multiply. So what I've been liking the most is this setup. So you'll notice the iPad, a secondary device over here. I'm actually using Zoom here to do the call. Now, the interesting thing is this company, you could not make a Zoom call at the company because they wouldn't let Zoom, they use Teams, Microsoft Teams. But the thing about the iPad or your phone is it's not the company's equipment. So you can use whatever you want. So everyone there just pulled out their phone or their tablet and used the secondary device for video and audio. And then we still are using Teams. We're using that to share the screen. But the only thing that's going through the Hangout or going through the Teams call is the share screen, right? And that cuts down a lot of the bandwidth that's going through the VPN. Made it much easier to share screens, be responsive, have that work. It also has some interesting side effects, right? So like if a computer goes out versus an internet goes out, you can actually tell, right? Because there's some redundancy built in for hiccups. So if I can see you and hear you, but I can't see your screen, then I know that like your computer's down. If your computer and the call die at the same time, I know your internet went down. It's quite useful.
Llewellyn, there's something in chat saying, I've managed a paired programming team before.
Yeah.
How does that scale up to a mob? Is there a significant loss in productivity as the communication goes up?
You mean as communication tax goes down, is there a significant gain in productivity? I think it's the way that would go. So I am a fan of pair programming. There's a style of pair programming that I invented. Like that's how much of a fan I am of it. And I do a lot of it. But mainly I pair in teams of 2. And the moment that I have more than 2 people in a team, I move to a mob. It's more productive. We'll talk about some of the reasons why later, but I have found it to be massively more productive.
Are there assumptions on people's expertise or defined roles and responsibilities?
Defined roles in a mob don't matter so much. We'll talk about that more too as we get into it, but expertise also doesn't matter that much. The reason is that it's not what you know, it's what you don't know. Wait, I have that wrong. It's not what you don't know, it's what you know.
Which sounds to me like a little bit like expertise.
Right, but everybody has expertise. Everybody has something they have expertise in that you don't have.
Okay. So sorry to keep this nail, but there is an old phrase that was very popular about 5 years ago. It was called the wisdom of the crowds. And when you look deeply at it, what you found is, yes, a crowd could have wisdom if it was the right crowd. If it was the wrong crowd, you'd go nowhere. And so that's one of the lessons from that 5-year-old phrase.
Well, yes, but yeah, we'll get into that a lot. This is different than just wisdom of a crowd, right? Wisdom of a crowd is very often in a crowd, there is no real communication between the crowd, right? You're looking more at just averages. All right, so mob programming. All the brilliant people working on the same thing at the same time in the same space. Up until this part of the sentence, this is just Agile. It's this last part that makes it weird and different. It's on the same computer. From Woody Zuhl, who's sort of the grandfather of mob programming. Here's the basics. We are going to have one person at the keyboard. That person is called the driver. I have talked to so many people about this for almost a decade now. The single most misunderstood thing, the thing I am saying right now, which you are most likely misunderstanding, is that the person at the keyboard is not doing any thinking. The person who knows the most is probably not the person at the keyboard, probably should not be the person at the keyboard. We are not watching this person work. They are just typing. They are being a smart input device. So if they're not thinking, we need some thinking to be done. And in the beginning, we start with a designated navigator. And we do this because most people have some experience, quite a lot of experience, of taking an idea from their head and putting it into the keyboard with their own hands. Maybe 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years experience doing this. And they do not even have hours of experience of getting an idea into a computer through someone else's hands. We're going to have to learn how to talk to each other. Oh, we're going to have to learn how to listen to each other. That's something my programmers don't have a lot of practice with either. We're going to need both of those. And so we need to make space in the beginning to learn stuff. This is making space to learn is one of the things that companies and people do absolutely badly all the time. We'll talk about that more. We're going to talk to each other in a pattern. This pattern is helpful. We're going to go intent, location, details. So a while back, I was in the bathroom and my girlfriend turned to me and she's like, "Can you hand me my foundation?" And you know, she could tell by my utter lack of doing anything that I had no idea what she was talking about. And so she moved from intent down to location, and she told me it was in the medical chest, it was up at the top, it was over on the left. And so now I'm holding it in my hand and I'm trying to open it up, but it has like these child locks on it. So again, she could see my struggle. And so she dropped down to details. And she's like, "You have to reach underneath it. There's a clasp." And so now I open it up and I hand it to her. The next time she's talking to me, she doesn't have to start at details. She doesn't have to say, "Move your hand up, move it over to," she can just say, "Please give me my foundation." I'm an adult. I know what that is now. Right? So by following this ladder, by following this, you always are giving people the right amount of information. Right? You're always giving them so they're not confused, but you aren't speaking to them like a child, right? You're building up their knowledge, you're building up their vocabulary, and you're treating them with the exact right amount of knowledge that's needed for the thing. And the interesting thing about this is how unbelievably helpful it is for the person receiving it. But sometimes from the outside, this can look really weird. Right? So if you're talking to someone and they need help at the details, it can look like you're almost barking commands at them, right? So leveling through the intent, location, details, that can also help to make that just gentler, right? So that both the person receiving and the people seeing the person be talked to realize, oh yeah, that's exactly what that person needed right now. And we are going to rotate really quickly. My average rotation time is 4 minutes. My long rotation time is 7 minutes. That's a very advanced rotation time. And my short rotation time is 2 minutes. 2 minutes at the keyboard, 2 minutes navigating. Move. That is not enough time to finish a thought. And so if you're not finishing it, the rest of your team actually has to be following with you so that thought can continue. And that ability to get the whole team actually on the same page, a big part of that comes from this. Online, I tend to use a mob timer to do that. So this is what that looked like yesterday. It's a little piece of software. You can run it on the web or you can install it on your computer. And it tracks everyone's name, tracks how much time they have. The big thing in the middle will go down, but the little thing in the side will stay there. So everyone sort of knows, hey, Adul's coming up next. And Harold is on board right now. And we are going to do retrospectives a lot. You can see the sticky notes all over the walls. Right? A lot of people currently are doing retrospectives once a sprint. So once every 2 weeks. That is not good for me. We usually do them either every 2 hours or every half a day. So do one right before lunch, do one right before you go home for the day. These are quicker retrospectives than people might be used to. But they're super helpful. So much is happening that you need to pause and digest and even just sometimes acknowledge what just happened, or it just gets like overwhelming. Of course, we're not going to use sticky notes anymore. So our retrospectives nowadays have a tendency to look like online mind maps. Here's the one from yesterday. We did this at around 1 o'clock, so that would have been about 3 hours into our session.
Is a mind map better than using stickies on Mural or on Miro?
No, I'm a fan of Mural as well. I wouldn't say a mind map is better. I enjoy both of those. Okay. Mural is a good tool. I tend to use the mind map. I like the way it tends to generate ideas from each other. Where I find the stickies a lot of times don't. The advantage of the stickies is that everyone can do them asynchronously, which means you can get comments from people who otherwise tend to be quiet. Both of them are good tools. And then the question we always get is like, what's the right size for a mob? And I don't believe there is a right size for a mob. In the same way as I don't think there's a right size for a band, right? Depending on what you're trying to play, maybe you need a quartet, maybe you need a 50-piece orchestra. What I do believe is that there's a heuristic that will tell us if it's the right size for what we're doing in the moment. And that heuristic is everybody contributing or is everybody learning? As long as everyone's contributing or learning, we have got an engaged and right size mob. If we have, 3 people and one of them is not contributing or learning, we probably should be a pair. If we've got 20 people and we keep getting stuck because we need to go get the marketing manager to answer questions every 5 minutes, we should probably have an extra person in our mob. Like, you want that flow. If everyone's contributing and everyone's learning, you've got it.
I'm curious. What do you do if there are software phases that have a lot of time? Like, let's say it takes an hour to compile, or in the world of artificial intelligence, it often takes an hour to train a neural net.
Yeah.
So what do you do then?
Yeah, so there's a really interesting aspect of there. Would you agree that wait time of an hour is a problem?
I can imagine productively using the first 10 or 15 minutes, but after that, I'm sitting there waiting for the results for what my team just entered. I'm
yeah. So if I have 5 different people working on it, does the compile time, is it shorter for the other people?
I am hoping that every 4 minutes you've rotated people around and they are busy building the code and the infrastructure to tackle a problem, and they need some kind of feedback cycle. Without a feedback, if if the navigator sees no road signs and no feedback, how does the navigator know which way to navigate? You don't just keep building code forever.
That's a good point. How do you do it right now?
I am accustomed to, well, that's a good problem. In that, I'm accustomed to seeing people futz around with the data and the neural net for maybe an hour, and then they submit it, and then they go off for another hour while it's training, and then they come back. So 1 hour of active keyboard time, then an hour of making coffee and talking to others and doing email, and then back to the coding again.
So you put everyone in a mob and you would do the same thing. However, probably if the entire team takes an hour off at once, somebody's going to say, what the heck is going on with this hour of compile time or this hour of machine training? If the whole team is just sitting there waiting for the compile time, let's say instead of an hour, it's like 15 minutes. So we're just waiting for it. People are going to be like, oh God, this compile time sucks. Now, the interesting thing about this is mobbing is not creating the problem. You separate those people, they all still have the same compile time, they still have the training time. It's just happening silently, so no one sees the problem. You put them in the mob, and all of a sudden this problem is going to surface. The thing about it is it's a real problem. It's also a solvable problem. There are ways to get better feedback cycles. There are ways to get shorter compile times. And if they show up repeatedly hitting 5 people, your team will actually start to fix that problem. If they're happening individually to the same 5 people, it happened to all 5 people, but individually, they will just suffer in silence with that. And that's one of the huge powers I've seen in a mob is what I would just refer to as courage to actually tackle the important problems that when we're by ourselves, we just sort of suffer through. But it's a real problem, and it's one that should be solved. So there's some working agreements that are really important to make this style of work effective. And kindness and consideration and respect seem to be the ones. I've seen mobs that do not adhere to these working agreements and they fall apart. Like, it will not work. However, if you're like me and you have no idea how to do these 3 things, you can do what I did when I started and fake it. Turns out if you fake kindness, consideration, and respect, it works just as well. Right? And over time, you'll just learn how to do it. Kindness is pretty easy. It doesn't mean you have to agree with somebody. It just means be nice while you're disagreeing. And consideration is usually around listening. And that can be hard in general, but it can be super hard if you're trying to get someone to listen to something that you think is wrong. Right? If you think it's wrong, it can be really hard to listen to that person's idea. We'll talk about some strategies to deal with that. And then finally, respect. And of course, respect for each other. But also respect for the code, respect for the work. One of the things I see that's like an easy trap early on is that you're working on some code that programmers wrote before you. They're not here anymore. And that code is ugly. And so you start making fun of the code. And making fun of others can be an interesting way for a group to bond together. But the problem with that, the reason this is a trap, is that it also instills this fear in every single person that someday that's going to be them. The people who wrote the code, they might have written some ugly code, but they weren't trying to write ugly code. They were trying to solve problems, and in trying to solve problems the best way they could at the time, under the limitations they were under the stress they were under the knowledge that they had. And so respecting the previous work while still trying to improve it It's a really important thing. And it's going to be one of the bedrocks, well, all three of these really, that's going to start to lay the safety that really is going to make this team succeed. So another thing that's asked a lot is what happens if you have multiple ideas? Very often there are multiple ideas on how you should solve a problem. And our answer is really simple. If we have multiple ideas, we do all of them. We'll try one, then we'll undo it. We'll try the second one. If we have a third one, we'll undo it. We'll try the third one. After we've done all of them, then we will vote on which one we like the best. Teams seem to always have a, not unanimous, but overwhelming preference for an idea. That doesn't mean it's always right, by the way. This goes to the wisdom of crowds. There are times that they choose the wrong idea. I can tell it's the wrong idea because they're disagreeing with me. But the thing is, there's two things that happen when they choose the wrong idea. One thing is, you know, maybe it doesn't matter. We choose this idea. It doesn't really impact the rest of our life. We move on. You know, that happens, absolutely. You don't have to have the best of everything, right? Adequate is okay. And the other thing is, sometimes it does matter. And if it does matter, we will revisit that idea. It will come back. That's what mattering means, is that the wrong decision is going to impact you again and again and again. And so when it comes back, we'll revisit again. And very often, if it does come back, we end up changing to a different idea. Sometimes the original one we had, sometimes a brand new one that solves it even better. But either way, the team is where the team is ready to be at the moment. And then later on, they can get better. So we do both. Doing both ideas, if it takes 20 minutes to do my idea, and it takes 20 minutes to do your idea, and then we throw one of them away, we are going to waste 20 minutes. That's time we won't get back. Now, if you want to save that 20 minutes, you can do it with just easily a 1 hour or 90-minute meeting. You can take that hour meeting, talk about it, and then you'll save the 20 minutes. It's not very productive. It's not a good ROI. So we just do both. And when you do both, some very interesting things happen. One is people no longer have to fight to get their idea listened to. It's interesting when people who are not used to being listened to all of a sudden are being listened to. They start talking more. They start having more ideas. And this is one of the reasons while introverts find mob programming overwhelming at first, is the way I would put it. They're usually some of the biggest fans when they get through to the other side. Because being an introvert often means that life is stressful, that people don't listen to you, that people don't hear you, that they don't give you enough credit. Being an extrovert is like a better way to deal in our current business world. But when the team starts listening to you, start seeing your value, when they stop becoming like coworkers and start becoming like a team, it's better for introverts. It's a bigger gain for them.
Before you move on, Llewellyn, your example was a 20-minute, two 20-minute choices, but it could be 2 half-day choices or 2 4-day choices.
It could be. We have a rule that we are willing to spend 2 days trying ideas, but I have never gotten past 2 hours. Most ideas are smaller. And if it is a 4-day idea, you should really be thinking about how do you make your tasks smaller. If your tasks are 4-day tasks, you should be thinking about how to do your stories smaller. Chris has a great session on how to split stories, but the back of the envelope version is use smaller numbers.
Yeah, it's not the story problem, it's the architecture problem. We've got two choices for the architecture.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to get into them to find out, to learn, do the learning that we need to do.
If it takes you 4 days to set up an architecture, you are also architecting too big. Right? Like, I'm serious about this. Like, learn to take smaller steps would be my suggestion. There's always faster and quicker ways of doing things, and smaller ways to experiment with an architecture. Sorry, there's something I totally missed here. One of the wins in trying an idea, by the way, is sometimes people have stupid ideas. Some of you have kids. You might have had this experience where a kid like wants to do something like shove a bean up their nose. Trying to talk that person out of shoving a bean out of their nose, you can spend hours on it unsuccessfully. Let them put the bean up their nose. The plus side is in software, you can always undo it, right? So do the stupid thing, right? Sometimes the win is just realizing that this was a stupid idea. And you know what? There's a win too when you tell a teammate, when you demonstrate to a teammate, I am willing to walk into the stupid with you, right? Like that actually means a lot. Like, I think this is a mistake and I will join you on it. That says a lot. The other thing is really brilliant and novel ideas and stupid ideas often look the same. So sometimes an idea seems really stupid and you do it and it turns out to be really brilliant. And so by trying the stupid ideas, we also get some really wonderful gems. And all this comes to like a fundamental dynamic change when you work together versus when you talk about work together. If you are in a meeting and you sit there and you listen and you don't say anything and then you leave, you do not win the meeting. That's not how you win a meeting. Might be how you get through a meeting. It's not how you're going to move up. Right? The way you win a meeting is you bring the idea, you fight for the idea, you convince others to do the idea, and hey, super big win, you won't actually have to do the work, others will do the work, but you will still get credit for the idea. In a mob, the way that you win is that the work is done. In a meeting, the way that you win is that people agree to do the work in the future your way. And because the win in a mob is that the work is done, it starts meaning that we start caring about the work more than we care about credit. And that is a really powerful thing. In fact, in our advanced mobs, we will preference the order in which we try ideas. And so we preference in two ways. One is the person with the least privilege. So the person who talks the least, the person who's the newest, the intern, like whoever the person is who has the least privilege will do their idea first. The other way we'll preference is the stupidest idea first. Whatever seems like the stupidest, craziest idea, that's what we do first. And one of the things that's interesting is sometimes you'll have like a team lead who is really passionate about the way this needs to be done. And this junior developer is like, oh, I think we could try it this way. And they're like, oh, you're an idiot. And then we do the junior way. Then we turn to the team lead and we say, okay, let's do your idea. And often they will kind of look at us and be like, I don't care anymore, it works. Like there's just a very big difference between fighting for work that you have to do in the future versus fighting to do work again that's already done, right? We have a very different perception about that. And so once you change it to the work being done, you just find that people naturally become a bit more pragmatic. Pragmatic? That's not the right word. Pragmatic? That might be the word. Yeah, anyhow. If they still care, it's usually because there's something important there, right? So that's not how we're going to do it. We will use the mob timer nowadays because we're going to be doing it remote. However, I should mention this. I didn't mention this. There are a couple different ways that we do this. And in person, I always rotate the driver. But remotely, I don't. There's sort of 3 modalities that I work with remotely. And I want to bring these up because if you try this, you might need to pay attention to some of these restrictions. So modality number 1 is actually the way that we're doing here, where the driver is rotating every time. There are some tools that can help with this. There's a tool called Mob that will just commit to a get branch and then check out on the next person's computer automatically on a synchronized timer. Or you can just literally do that, commit to a branch, pull from a branch, do it. If your switching times are low, which also usually means the team has been mobbing for a while and that their source code is in like pretty reasonable state, that works, and it works pretty well. A lot of places, their source trees aren't in very good situations. And so there's 2 modalities I'll work there. The most common one I work with is actually a dedicated driver for the entire time. That's what I did the other day. So I had Claire, her computer was set up with both the C++ environment and the Python environment. Just setting that up on 3 people's computers would have taken me 2 hours. And so we had Claire, she was our dedicated driver. She did not do any of the navigating. She just typed for people the whole time. They told her what to type, she typed it. I will do that very often, where I'll have for a session a dedicated driver. And then each session, so if I'm doing it like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, every single day I will have a different person drive. But for the day, that person is the driver. Not for a whole day, for like 2 hours for a morning, something like that. But for the session. The other way I will do it is what I would call like a semi-reasonable handoff, right? So I have some teams, they could switch computers, but it would take like, it would take like 2 minutes to swap it from one computer to another computer. Now, 2 minutes every 4 minutes is really expensive. So what we would do is we'd have a dedicated driver, and then it would go through each of the members of the team as a navigator. And when it got back to the driver, we would swap to a new dedicated driver, and we would do another round of every single person navigating with the new driver. So sort of every full cycle, it would rotate. Right? And so those are the 3 modalities. It's rotating every single time, it's rotating every full cycle, or it's rotating every session, but only once per session. And I found that to be a very practical way to deal with the limitations that changing who's at the typing seat can just be hard remotely.
Explain navigator, Llewellyn. So the driver isn't doing any thinking. The navigator is listening to everybody else and coalescing. What does the navigator do?
The navigator isn't really listening. I mean, he's not listening to everyone else. But in general, the rest of the mob is doing less talking while the person navigating is navigating. They're the decider, right? And so they're speaking up if the person is asking for help, or they're speaking out if they see an obstacle or an opportunity that they're missing. But in general, we're trying to stay as quiet as possible. Actually,
everybody's trying to stay quiet except for the navigator.
Yeah, let me switch for a second and show you just a quick thing.
I've been assuming the navigator's writing on the whiteboard and listening to the mob, and they're debating back and forth, and every once in a while they tell the driver what to do. But
oh no, they are constantly telling the driver. If the navigator doesn't speak, the driver's not doing anything.
But the rest of the mob, do they direct the driver, or do they direct the navigator, and the navigator decides what to do?
So they definitely do not direct the driver. They can say things to the navigator, but the navigator is doing most of the speaking, like 90% of the speaking. Right? It's okay. Like,
So
if you wait 2 minutes, you'll be up. Right? So like,
so the navigator's doing most of the working thinking, but everybody else is thinking in case the navigator goes south.
well, and also because you're like, if you're not the navigator, let's say you're in a team of like 5 people, right? So then one person's the driver, one person's the navigator, there's 3 other people. You either have between 0 and 4 minutes before you're the navigator, or on the outside, you have between 8 and 12 minutes before you're the navigator. So it's about to be you navigating, right? So you're paying attention because it's about to be all eyes on you, right? Even if you just got off, right? Because we have very quick cycle times. So this is not necessarily specific to mobbing, but just a sort of general thing about strategy. So I'm a gamer. I like playing video games. I've been playing a lot of them lately. Here's my crew. All right, so I got Balto. Balto's big and strong and tough. He's awesome. Look at how much damage he does. Look at how much health he has. I got Naomi. She's also pretty awesome. Not quite as strong or tough, but she's a ranged unit. She can shoot far. But then I also got Faye. Faye is a complete noob. She doesn't do much damage. Oh, she misses a lot, and she dies easily. Anyhow, we're out and we come across these vampires. Now, Balto can kill these things with a single blow. Not a problem at all. But here's the thing. I'm not going to do that. And the reason I'm not going to do that is because I got to kill this guy. There's no way Balto can kill this guy by himself. So I'm going to take those vampires and I'm going to take his axe and I'm going to nerf him. I'm going to give him a club. The club does hardly any damage. And then I'm going to take Faye and I'm going to focus on her. I'm going to let her kill the vampires. Now, she's going to miss some, but eventually she'll get them killed. And she's going to gain that experience from killing them. And that's going to help her to become stronger and level up. And you might ask, like, if I'm just trying to level up Faye, why even bring Balto? But, I mean, the thing is, I want to win the game, but I also need to win this battle. If I just send Faye here, she's going to die, right? And I'm not doing this because I like Faye. Faye's not a real person. I'm trying to win the game. This is the strategy to help me win the game. I need all my team members to be strong. That's how I win the game. And the same thing is going to apply when I'm mobbing. Now, I've got my expert. She knows how to slay this problem. And I've got my noob. He could use some practice. So, same technique. I nerf my expert. I make her sit on her hands. I make her be quiet. Make her make space for the newbie. And he's going to go off and he's going to miss just like Faye. And so we're going to have to maybe nerf her a little extra because it can be really hard for an expert who knows the right answer to see somebody do the wrong thing. But when they are done, we are not done. We still care about winning this battle as well as the war. So then my expert steps up. This is where she introduces a new thing, a new technique. And that's how I win the game of software. It's the same way I win the other games. I level up my whole team. And so when we make space for that navigator, that's part of letting the entire team get stronger. And a big part of why mob programming is so effective is because the teams start working together so effectively. And very often we try to measure like individual intelligence when we really should be measuring team intelligence.
And what is the role of the facilitator?
So the facilitator is mainly trying to make sure that these rules are happening. In the beginning, I'm usually facilitating rather strongly. People aren't rotating. People aren't listening. People aren't talking. As they start doing it, my role as a facilitator is literally to figure out how long I cannot be in the room, right? So I keep water by me at all times. When I'm done drinking it, I have to refill it, so that helps me get out of the room. After I've drunk a couple bottles of it, I need to empty. That helps me get out of the room. In the first few days that I'm with the team, it can be really hard to leave the room. Like I'm just struggling. But they get used to me leaving while we're mobbing. We'll talk about that because this is another thing that's super useful, especially with remote. Right? We did 4 hours of mobbing yesterday. I needed to drink during there. I needed to go to the bathroom during there. My girlfriend had an emergency in the middle that I had to go and deal with. It wasn't a problem. There were 5 people working. When 4/5 of the team is there, it basically feels like the team is there. So you can come in and out much easier in a mob than you can if you're working by yourself or if you're working in a pair, right? And that goes for flow as well. When I'm working by myself and I get interrupted, oh God, it's like my entire memory, like getting back into the rhythm of what I was doing before I got interrupted, it's so hard to do. When there's a mob, if I get interrupted and I come back, they are still in the rhythm. And it's really easy for me to just pick up and join, right? So I can almost instantaneously get back into flow. And that means it's much easier to come in and out. Also, those 3 people that I didn't know, I feel like I know them a bit. I feel like I trust them a bit, which is pretty impressive for only being together for 4 hours. People do all these team building activities, but a really good team building activity is work together as a team. Surprising how good that is.
So as leaders, we don't have to protect individuals. We have to protect our mobs.
Yeah, you have to protect the team. Also, an interesting thing about facilitating is one of the things you don't have to do is program. Now you can join, but I don't suggest, I suggest non-technical people join the mob. I do not suggest that the facilitator joins the mob while they are facilitating. In the same way as people are like, should you have a dedicated Scrum Master? Yes, because when you don't have a dedicated Scrum Master, they tend not to be able to be a proper Scrum Master, right? Like it's just a different modality of working. So you can have a rotating facilitator, like on a self-contained mob, but I highly suggest having the role of a facilitator. You will see things from the outside that you just can't see while you're in it. So there's some questions as to why this works, right? My first thing is, there's also some questions on like how to get it to work. And the thing I want to ask is, what's your budget? And I don't mean what's your time or what's your money budget, right? I mean, what's your time budget? If you are working with a team, how much time do you have each week to help the team get better? One of the amazing things for me when I've asked this question to full-time coaches, internal coaches at companies, is very often that number is 0. Like they have hired someone to come and help their teams get better, and literally given them 0 time to train with the team. Like, it's crazy. If you have kids and they play music or arts or sports, you are aware of how much practice is involved, probably because you are driving them to practice. Right? If those kids, let's say that they're doing football, if they move from playing football at in middle school to football in high school, that practice time goes up. If they then go to college, it goes up again. If they then become a professional athlete, it goes up again. It doesn't get less. But somehow, we think that if you become a professional programmer or a professional software engineer, your practice time should go down. We don't make space for practice at work. If you are coaching a team, if you want to get them to improve in anything, you need some time budget each week with them, some amount of time to sit with the team and say, what are we going to try to learn? What are we going to try to do differently? If your budget right now is 0, like, that's your first problem. You need to find some budget to try things with your team. I really like 90 minutes a day, every day. I find that to be a really good cadence for trying things. Very often it becomes 2 hours because companies don't seem to like half hours. I don't know why. So a lot of times it's 2 hours a day. But every day is more important to me than the amount of time. If you had an hour, I would much prefer you do this 10 minutes a day for 5 days than you do it for an hour once a week. The repetition is important. Those studies, by the way, come from the deliberate practice studies. They are well borne out by science. Another thing about facilitating a mob is you will learn things in a mob that you can never learn by talking to the mob, right? There's just this element of, like, if you want to see what people are doing in their native habitat, you've got to go and see them in their native habitat. Like, you've got to see them work. So often, after a first mob, what you will normally hear is what I would just call excuses, right? Oh, well, we didn't have time to prepare to make it so that we could compile the code, right? Does your code not compile normally? Like, yeah, it turns out, no, it doesn't. But so why didn't they bring this up? This has got to be, like, causing you pain every single day. They don't bring it up because who wants to be the idiot who doesn't know how to compile their code on their computer? There's so many problems that people don't bring up because as knowledge workers, we always want to show that we are competent and in control. When you sit with the team, you will discover real problems that you can help with sometimes, or you can get the right person to help with. I was sitting with a team in Michigan, and when we do mobbing in person, I've not figured out how to do this remotely. But when we do mobbing in person, very often we get visitors. Sometimes the visitors just hover and watch. Very often they will actually sit down and join the mob. So we had a manager join us, and he noticed that we had a pretty long compile time. Now, we didn't have an hour compile time, but we did have like a 5.5 minute compile time. He's like, why are they waiting so much? And I'm like, oh, we're having real hard problems with the compile time. And he's like, oh, how much time does that take each day? And so, like, we did quick back of the envelope, and we calculated the time and then the cost. And so for the floor that we were on, we calculated they spent between $2 and $4 million a year in employee salaries waiting for their compile time or their code to compile. And around $200,000 on that team of 6 people alone. When the manager heard that, he's like, we need to find a way to fix that. And when I came back in 2 months, they had a new build system. A lot of time, like this code has been there for 15 years, right? Like this is not a problem I invented, and I didn't even solve the solution, right? I just literally, it's allowing it to surface. If you want to see what's really going on, if you really want to see what the real troubles in your team are, not what they're reporting, but what's actually going on, there's nothing more powerful than actually just observing them work. Also, this is crazy powerful if you want behavioral changes. Like if you tell your teams, I want you to do things, like I want you to do smaller stories, I want you to write your tests first. It's really hard to actually make them do that. If you do things like you want better code quality, people will do things like put restrictions, sonar cubes, stuff like that, some checks that will automatically check that you do things. People are remarkably creative on how they get around those checks. But if you just sit and watch them do stuff, you can be like, hey, where's the test? And they'll grumble and they'll write the test. And the next time it comes up, you'll be like, hey, where's the test? And they'll grumble a little less and they'll write the test. And eventually they'll just get into the habit of writing the test. I use this as my primary way of doing behavioral change. And ooh, there's a really, really powerful thing about this. Humans make decisions based largely on how many other people are doing it. If lots of other people are doing a thing, there's a good chance you will do it too. And so in a mob, very often I will introduce a behavior and someone will pick it up. There's usually like an early adopter. And then the next time I'll sort of mention the behavior, but the other person will enforce how to do it. And then the next time they'll sort of mention it and someone else will enforce. And now we got 2 people. And then from 2 people, it jumps to 4, and from 4, it will usually jump to the whole team. So it's much easier to actually spread a behavior when the team can see their other teammates are doing it as well. So you can actually change what your teams do.
How easy is it going to do this in like the current environment? You know, because basically, again, it requires more conversation. You know, Zoom meetings to want to get the general idea of what other people are up to. To me, that what you just described works best almost in a hallway conversation. I mean, I've done that most certainly.
No. You're seeing them do it because we're working together on the same code.
Oh, okay.
It's in the mob, you're actually seeing them do it.
Okay.
You're not talking about, oh, I did it, right? Which is also not as powerful as actually seeing someone do something.
Yeah. Actually, I actually flipped focus for a second. I got it. Sorry. Thank you.
The other thing is coding experience, completely not required. To facilitate a mob, extra not required, right? You need to be able to do a couple simple things. You need to be able to understand if people aren't treating each other well. That's something that most people in this group are quite good at. You need to be able to understand if they're stuck. You don't need to know how to unstick them. When they're stuck, you usually just need to ask them, hey, it seems like you're stuck. How can we get unstuck? Programmers are good at solving problems. They're not always good at recognizing problems, but they're good at solving them. So you don't need to know that. And in fact, there's a story I'll tell here of a 9-year-old who came to us, didn't know programming, was dragged there because her dad didn't have a babysitter, and ended up joining us later in programming in Java. Not a problem at all that she did not know any Java. When she got at the keyboard, we told her keystrokes, right? We just dropped straight down to details. She just typed. And when she was navigating, she was actually super good because she didn't talk in programming. Like a lot of times people will skip that intention because they're used to going to the details. She stayed in intention because she had no other option. Also, well, we'll get to that. Okay. This is the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. It's a nice little book. It actually takes place like in the Bay Area. A strong team spends considerable time together, and by doing so, they actually save time by eliminating confusion and minimizing redundant effort. If this is true, like mobbing is the ultimate small team. Like we're spending considerable time together and we are eliminating just a ton of confusion and redundant effort. In fact, one thing that I see in mobbing that happens quite a lot, I on average, my teams that are mobbing full-time, 40 hours a week, get a 20 times boost in productivity, right? They are producing 20 times more than they did the same team before they mobbed. One of the ways that occurs is often in companies, you will see a piece of software written in 7 different places, 7 different ways. This usually ends up in a bug where you change it in 6 of those places and you forget about the 7th. What I see happening in a mob is they'll write a piece of software and they won't write it that much faster than if they were writing it individually. Usually it's about the same amount of time. And then the second time they write that software, someone on the mob will remember that they wrote something like it before. And this time they will change the code so that it calls it. So it's only written in one place, but called from 2 places. And that usually takes about the same amount of time as if they were just to write it sort of new again or copy and paste and change it. And then the third time, they will notice this and they will call the method, and that takes in the neighborhood of 20 seconds to a minute versus a day to 3 weeks. All right, like the productivity gain is just huge, right? Another mistake that I see very often is trying to be productive. Don't try to be productive when you start doing a mob. A lot of times I see teams, there's this thing that they've always wanted to do and they've never been able to do it. And hey, let's take this opportunity of trying to mob together to do this thing we've never been able to successfully do on our own. And if we can't solve it in the 2 hours that we solve for mobbing, they will declare mobbing a failure, right? Like, because your brain can't separate why the event failed. There's a skill to mobbing. When you play a new video game, you don't start on expert level. You start on beginner level. The first task you do, make it really simple, really easy. Don't start with the hard thing. This just goes to the fundamental idea of just make some space to learn. Slow rotations are the other thing I see a lot. People rotate really slowly. Usually they rotate really slowly because they want the person who's driving to be thinking, and they want enough time to finish their thought. Because when they rotate, everyone gets confused because no one was really paying attention. Ooh, Kimberly.
So we have 1 more minute before the end of our official program. So I'm happy to hang around forever.
Not been tracking time.
But I want you all to, let's wrap up so people can graciously exit, and those who want to stay can stay.
Let me show you one thing to end on then. So people often ask how this can be productive. And I think that's the wrong question. Efficiency, my dad is a professor, and efficiency is sort of like a god in the university, right? Like everybody wants everything to be efficient. What I found is it's a false god. I think a much better question is how can I be effective, not efficient? And so when I'm programming by myself, there are things I'm good at and there are things I'm bad at. And all of that goes into my work, the best of me and the worst of me. If I have 2 people and we're working side by side, the best of me goes into my work, the best and the worst of them goes into our work. The work gets the best and the worst of both of us. But if we pair together, We still have our highs and our lows, but this is no longer what goes into the work. What goes into the work is the best of both of us. Sometimes people tell me, wouldn't it be the average of both of you? But that doesn't even make sense, right? Like, let's say that one of the things I'm really bad at is I only ever test my thing on iPhone. I never test it on Android. One of the things that my pair is good at is they test on both. Do we test on the average of an iPhone and what is the average of an iPhone and an Android phone? Like, that's not a thing, right? Or let's say I know how to do good unit testing, and I'm pairing, like, we don't do mediocre unit testing together. No, we do the good unit testing because I know how to do it. I'm bringing it. Or let's say they understand how to do good Kafka. We're not going to do intermediate Kafka. Like, my lack of knowledge isn't going to make them forget how to do Kafka, right? We get the best. And when we're in a mob, that line gets higher and flatter. And so the quality just goes way up. We're in a place where quality really makes a difference, where our mistakes are really disproportionately costly to our successes. That's that 9-year-old girl I was telling you about who joined us for programming. Anyhow, name is the most efficient way to work. Like, it's just as simple as that. Those are all the resources. I will also put this link in the chat.
Well, okay, this is fascinating. I'm just thrilled to hear somebody who's an engineering guy talking about human beings and psychological safety. And I'd love to open it up for anyone else's conversations or questions. Type something into chat or unmute yourself, and we'll stop sharing Llewellyn's screen.
I was just going to agree with you, Kimberly, that I'm surprised at how much, like, humanity gets created, getting productivity and humanity go together, and, you know, and working together. It's just really remarkable.
And by the way,
Yeah.
I have known this. I have the data, and
I
it's
think for me,
So the data on this has been published for decades, over 30 years. It's been known that these kinds of factors dramatically and significantly impact productivity, efficiency, effectiveness, profitability, shareholder value. In fact, I just took a class, a 2-day class recently on how to be prepared to be on the board of directors. And what we're finding is that investors are now holding boards accountable for crappy leadership and disgusting organizational cultures that suck your will to live, because they know it decreases their share price. So get ready for shareholder activism that comes in and says, oh, you have crappy psychological safety and your teams don't work together well and your leaders don't lead effectively. That's going to affect our share price. So in fact, one of the companies that I've worked with in the past, the employee engagement, which is a measure on how much people really feel like they're committed to the team. If your employee engagement is less than 70%, which is double the US average, you have to write a personal get well plan to the CEO about how you're going to fix it, because it's becoming so obvious that just doing technology is not going to get business results. Who else wants to say something?
I had a sort of a detailed question that was trying.
I want to address that for 2 things. One thing that I found. Right. So there's a saying that you don't leave a job, you leave a manager, right? Mm-hmm. One of the things I found about the teams that do mob is they tend to form really strong teams. And that has both a significant advantage and I would say even a significant disadvantage. One of the advantages is the team becomes really strong and it's much harder, they're much less likely to have anyone leaves. Very often the entire team leaves, right? I've seen both when a single member of the team decided it's time to leave, within a month, the entire team is gone. And I've also seen very often a single member of the team leaves and then literally drags his team to another company, right? So the team was like, no, we want to stay together as a team. We don't care where it is.
There was another question.
Yeah, so I had a sort of a detailed question.
Someone else had a question.
But was meant to help me just understand the navigator role more. So in your example, you talked about the strong programmer sitting there. You showed them sitting there thinking about letting the other person take their approach. So in a mob, would they not suggest a different alternative until they were in the navigator, or would they speak up once that navigator was done with that piece of code?
Or even during it.
Yeah.
So we will often try to make space to let them, like if the current space for them to be able to finish what they're doing, even if we think it's the wrong thing. There's some things we'll interrupt for. So like, for example, if they haven't committed, we'll be like, hey, even so, we'll still usually leave it to the navigator to make the decision. If the navigator is about to start something new, so like, let's say that we're working on something else, then we'll do an interrupt and say, wait, we have other ways we'd like to try that. Can we try this? So before switching a task, right? And again, I'm thinking of tasks as much smaller than you're writing on the board. But before we switch what we're working on, we will try a new thing. But as long as they're moving, even if they're moving in the wrong direction, I favor movement over anything else. In fact, one of the worst things that can happen in a mob is it just moves to talking, right? Basically, now we're back to a meeting, right? So movement is better. And a saying I really love from Katrina is, failure helps us to see what success should look like, right? Sometimes by doing the wrong thing, that's how we see what the right thing is. Does that answer your question?
Mike? Yeah.
Take your silence as a...
Yeah, he got a thumbs up. There's a thumbs up in the window. So he's got it. Yep.
All right.
Yeah, that's great, Mike. Great use of Zoom. Yep, and I'll give you a thumbs up for that one, followed by an applause. There we go. Right on. Any other questions?
One of the most common questions is, will we get a copy of your slides?
Yes, and in fact, if you follow that link, there are copies to them right there.
Okay. And a thank you from Tulsa. I can read it for.
So, wait, I got one more thing to offer.
Okay.
I have one more thing to offer. I have no longer occurring. So if you have a team that would like to try it out, I'm willing to donate 2 hours in the very beginning just to help you get started on the right foot. So if you're like, hey, I'd like to try this with your team, and your team wants to try it correctly.
Okay, that's fantastic. Hope you all got that. Anything else, Llewellyn?
So Llewellyn, can I put that message out to 1,300 of our members, or should I just keep that for tonight?
No, you go ahead. It's an open invitation.
Yeah.
If I've got the time, I'm happy to help.
Okay, I will do it. 2
I bet
hours of experimenting to demonstrate this powerful tool.
Oh, facilitating, yeah.
Facilitating,
To
yeah.
demonstrate this powerful methodology. All righty.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Llewellyn. Thank you very much.
Okay.